It's not easy to launch a video games platform. The recent death of Google's Stadia shows that even one of the most highly resourced technology companies in the world can mess it up, and no one can really be sure why it happened. It was the prices. But as a broadly functional system with some actually recognisable games and some genuinely unique technological innovations, Stadia doesn't even come close to ranking as one of the worst game platforms of all time. That privilege is reserved for these unmitigated stinkers that were just waiting to ruin Christmas morning for some unsuspecting 12-year-old who asked for a PS1. For your approval then, here are the 7 worst video game consoles that have been consigned to the trash heap of history. Enjoy and beware spoilers for the financial results of the next poor company that tries to launch a brand new gaming platform.
Since the beginning of time, mankind has striven to double and redouble his powers.
A mysterious machine has appeared in homes across America.
Alright, baby.
Increase the power of the unit 40 times.
If you weren't around during the mid-1990s, then let me tell you, the console wars, they were real. Not like today, where all consoles are basically the same, so Sony makes The Last of Us and then Microsoft retaliates by attempting to buy Activision. More like an escalating technology arms race that saw everyone trying to outdo each other in one crucial area: bits.
Sega Genesis is 16 bits, 3DO is 32 bits, the Atari Jaguar is 64 bits. Which is more advanced? Clifford!
First came the 8-bit consoles like the NES and the Master System. Then came the 16-bit SNES and Mega Drive/Genesis. Everyone knew that the next Rubicon to be crossed would be the 32-bit threshold. But with consoles like the 3DO and the advertised 64 bits of the Atari Jaguar hitting the market before similar offerings from industry giants Sega and Nintendo, Sega in particular was starting to get worried that they were missing the boat. And I mean, looking at the games on the Atari Jaguar, you can see why. Sega did have a 32-bit machine in development, the Sega Saturn, but that was still a few years away. They needed something with the number 32 in it, and they needed it now, damn it! So came the Sega 32X, a mushroom-shaped add-on for the Sega Mega Drive that plugged into that console's cartridge slot, boosting that console's power for less than the cost of a full 32-bit machine.
32X.
The problem was that the 32X hit the market in America at the same time as the Saturn hit stores in Japan, so it very much had the feel of a temporary stopgap solution, and the rush to market meant that hardly anyone had any time to develop games for it, meaning it launched with a handful of fairly weak games, including several that also required the Sega CD add-on to be able to play. And for every exciting new release like Virtua Fighter, there was something like the port of Doom, which ran awkwardly, had to be windowed, and had about a third of its levels cut in order to release on the comparatively weak 32X. The 32X was a commercial failure, and Sega pivoted to the 32-bit Sega Saturn, which was also a commercial failure. Nintendo, meanwhile, skipped to the 32-bit generation entirely and went straight to the N64. One of them is still making consoles today. That is probably not a coincidence.
What if you could push a button and reset the entire video game industry?
Ooh, yeah.
With over 600 games, free to try, there's something for everyone.
When the Kickstarter for the Ouya console launched in 2012, it was an immediate, overwhelming success, raising $8.5 million. But a bit like Gangnam Style, it really peaked in 2012, and then by 2013, everyone had lost interest. Everything after the Kickstarter was downhill. It transpired that the Ouya console was essentially just an Android mobile phone without a screen. What's more, it wasn't even a particularly good Android phone, given that it wasn't equipped with the latest version of NVIDIA Tegra graphics available at the time. It's like Gears of War, the straight-to-VHS version. The biggest problem, though, was the almost complete absence of worthwhile games to play, and anything even worth considering was already available to anyone with an Android phone via the Google Play Store. There were occasional drives by Ouya to secure exclusives to the platform, but if you'd like to see how that went, check out the Wikipedia page for Ouya exclusive games. You could hold a thrash metal ukulele recital in Antarctica and get a better turnout. After limping along for a couple of years beyond the Ouya retail release in 2013, the company was sold to Razer in 2015, and 4 years later in 2019, the Ouya service itself was shut down, rendering any remaining consoles in the wild effectively useless, as a little extra kick in the teeth. So that's the story of the Ouya, short for who you think's actually going to play this thing.
It came from from the third dimension with its own brain, its own voice, its own legs. There's only one problem. It needs your eyes.
Nintendo might have one of the best track records in gaming, but even the Big N has the odd off day. I mean, just take a look at this. Now I see why they call it a band, because that should be banned. The worst of Nintendo's worst days, though, was the day the Virtual Boy was dreamt up, when they looked at their hugely popular Game Boy console, which was beloved by everyone, and thought, how do we do the complete opposite of that?
Virtual Boy, a 3D game for a 3D world. Wanna play?
The noble goal was to bring 3D virtual reality to the masses, but even before the console was released, the design was compromised. Nintendo experimented with full-colour prototypes, but apparently it would have driven the cost up enormously, and there were issues with image flickering that caused concerns about motion sickness and eye damage. If this thing was going to make it to store shelves at all, the Virtual Boy would only be able to display a single colour, and the colour they chose was red. Presumably, so when your eyes started bleeding from the strain, you wouldn't notice. If you thought Nintendo's Wii U was a failure, compare the Wii U's 13 million units sold to the fact that the Virtual Boy failed to shift even 1 million. It might have been something to do with the fact that it looked less like a gaming system and more like some kind of weird robot. That's not helping Nintendo. Although there were a couple of half-decent games, including Mario Tennis and Wario Land, the majority of the meagre 22 released games were forgettable trash. It's probably appropriate that one of the final games released for the system was a tie-in game for notorious box office bomb Waterworld. I believe the correct meme for this situation is "Stop, stop, he's already dead."
Engage.
Just because someone has achieved success in one area doesn't mean they'll also achieve success in a different field, like when Michael Jordan tried to play baseball, or like when Elon Musk tries to be likable and funny. The same is true of cell phone company Nokia, who had achieved huge success in the mobile phone market and now look to conquer the handheld gaming market as well with their hybrid phone and games console, the Nokia Engage. Previously, the best you could hope for when it came to games on your phone was Snake, and Snake 2. So the idea of having handheld console quality games on the cell phone that you carried with you everywhere was appealing, and Nokia felt confident that the Engage could compete with Nintendo's recently released Game Boy Advance. However, problems were apparent from the get-go. For a start, the Engage's design was very much more phone than it was games console, with absolutely loads of buttons and a tiny screen in a portrait aspect ratio that didn't give you very much room to actually see what was going on in whatever it was you were playing. Those many buttons were definitely not designed for gaming, making controls awkward, and while there was a decent range of good-looking games, including such big hitters as Tomb Raider and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, if you wanted to switch games, you had to take the back of the handset off and remove the battery in order to get at the cartridge slot. Hey, I like Super Monkey Ball, but it can probably wait until I get home. With all these issues and a hefty $300 price tag, the Engage was not a success, and in the early weeks of its release, the Game Boy Advance outsold it 100-1. The Engage was discontinued in 2006, which is probably for the best, as the next year, 2007, saw the release of the first iPhone, so Nokia had bigger things to worry about. Gotta give it to Snake though, this thing still slaps.
I was the first rapper with his own video game console. Stop playing with me. Now wait. I was the first rapper with his own video game console. Yeah!
Most consoles on this list at least launched with the intent to change the industry and become beloved by gamers. We have to assume that. The Soldier game from rapper and producer Soulja Boy, though, appears to be the exception. Instead, it's a rebadged emulation box that you can pick up on AliExpress for a fraction of the price Soulja Boy was charging. Some people online have gone as far as to call it a scam, but having consulted the Outside Xbox law firm, Google, and Google, I am categorically not saying that. I'm not sure why I'm sweating the legal stuff though, given that the 800 games included were a mix of ripped-off retro games from platforms including the NES, SNES, Mega Drive and PS1, and bizarre bootlegs like Super Mario 14. Do I have to have played Super Mario 13 to understand why he's got a freaking bow staff? If you are being generous, you might assume that Soulja Boy was just in the dark about quite how fabulously illegal the Soldier game console was. After all, he gave an interview with Rolling Stone ahead of the console's launch, describing it as 100% legit, suggesting he either doesn't understand percentages or doesn't understand the word legit. Still, undeterred, Soulja Boy returned in 2021 with a handheld console called the TRDR Pocket, which, you guessed it, was a hastily rebadged emulation console of middling to low quality. Fool me once, Soulja Boy. Wait, what am I talking about? You didn't even fool me the first time.
Visit worlds which were only dreams before Halcyon, like nothing you have experienced ever.
The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines Halcyon as characterized by happiness, great success, and prosperity, making the RDI Halcyon console the most misleading bit of naming since the Lone Ranger. Way to forget about Tonto. In fact, Halcyon's name was actually chosen specifically to evoke memories of HAL 9000, the talking computer from the seminal sci-fi movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. Perhaps forgetting that a key plot point in that movie is HAL murdering everyone on board the spaceship. And you expect me to put this thing under my TV? Built by RDI in 1985, the Halcyon was the company's attempt to capitalize on the success of its wildly popular arcade game, Dragon's Lair, which used Laserdisc technology to select scenes in the game via arcade controls. It's less of a game and more of a playable DVD menu. And that's playable in the loosest sense of the word. The Halcyon combined that same concept with what was at the time sophisticated voice recognition that allowed players to make decisions in the game by speaking to the console, and then forced players to change those decisions when the Halcyon failed to understand them.
Let's go to the forest clearing.
1.
What?
1.
Speak consistently, Stuart.
1.
Sir.
2.
2.
Is that okay? I mean,
sure.
Sure, that's a different story then.
The other problem is that bringing arcade technology into the home was expensive, and the console was due to cost a staggering $2,000 in 1985, which in 2023 money is, I don't know, $4 million probably. As a result, only a handful of consoles ever went on sale before RDI went almost immediately bankrupt. It's no great loss though. The Halcyon only had 2 games ready for release. One was an NFL football game that used footage from a real American football match between the then Los Angeles Raiders and the then San Diego Chargers, who are now the Los Angeles Chargers. And I thought the stuff on the pitch was confusing. The other game was a cartoon fantasy adventure called Thayer's Quest, which seemed to be predominantly about choosing between slightly different varieties of path and had the same brutal approach to trial and error failure as Dragon's Lair.
You just died.
Don't worry though, Thayer's Quest was eventually released as Kingdom: The Far Reaches on other consoles, such as the Philips CDI, so people could play it there instead. I mean, unless the Philips CDI was a massive failure as well.
Yeah, that old Ganon's no match for the king.
Link, go to Gamelon and find my father.
Great! I can't wait to bomb some Dodongos!
Back in 1991, electronics giant Philips released arguably the most boring console of all time, the Philips CDI. It's the plain porridge of consoles, the maths exam of consoles, the LinkedIn of consoles. This anonymous grey box sold for $799 and was designed to usher in a new age of multimedia and gaming based around the exciting new storage medium of CDs. In reality, that meant a ton of tedious edutainment and a bunch of god-awful FMV games.
Time's running out. Clear your head and get moving.
Plus Myst, because of course Myst was on there. Also, you know how your grandma refers to a game controller as a remote control? Well, the CDI's bundled controller literally was a remote control, shaped like one and transmitting signals via infrared. So not only was it uncomfortable to play with, if the dog ran in front of the TV, your controller stopped working and you lost a life. In spite of all this, through a weird quirk of corporate chicanery, the CDI featured games from some of Nintendo's most beloved franchises, Mario and Zelda. After Philips had collaborated with Nintendo on a proposed Super Nintendo CD add-on, which was abandoned after the Sega CD performed poorly, Philips was allowed to release 3 Zelda games and a Mario title. Though to say that these weren't up to Nintendo's usual standards is like saying Darth Vader is a bit disagreeable. Hotel Mario is an awful puzzle game where the objective is just to close a seemingly endless series of doors, and literally the only positive thing we can say about Zelda Wand of Gamelon is that it's the first Zelda game to actually let you play as Zelda herself.
What happened? Nothing, Link. We were just about to have a feast.
Great!
Assuming you want to play it at all, that is. Still, they weren't the only games on CDI originally made famous by Nintendo. There was also what must rank as the most soothing, relaxing, Bob Ross version of Tetris. Perfect for calming yourself down after you realize you just spent $799 on a Philips CDI.
So there you go, 7 consoles that were absolute, unmitigated trash. Speaking of the opposite of those things, we have some videos up. Here. One from us, which is another list video, and one from our sister channel from Outside Extra. So please do enjoy those, and hopefully people won't be making videos in like 25 to 30 years time about how bad those videos were. Thanks for watching. Bye.